Hello, everyone, and welcome to Next Best Picture's YouTube channel. I am Matt Neglia, the owner, editor-in-chief of nextbestpicture.com. And here joining me today, I have Isaiah Washington, contributor over at Next Best Picture.
Hey, how y'all doing?
All right, so Isaiah, I want to talk to you today about the possibility of adding a best stunts, best stunt coordination. I'm not sure exactly what we would be calling it, but an Oscar for stunts at the Academy Awards. You wrote a piece about this recently, and with the release of John Wick Chapter 4, we're going to be getting Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 later this year. And there just has been a lot of renewed interest around this topic as of late. Maybe because the superhero landscape is obviously dominating conversation so much within Hollywood that these action films just seem to be always on top of people's minds. Or when a more traditional action flick rolls around, like a John Wick or something that Tom Cruise produces, it just gets people talking. So I'm curious to know like what you see as the advantages, the disadvantages, and why do you think that this is something important that the Oscars need?
Well, I believe that this is something that one could make a case is important for the Oscars to need because a lot of what the Academy Award stands for is honoring the best of cinema. And with the categories that we see here, there are 23 categories, of course, that talk and represent about what we award with the Academy Awards. And I've noticed that a lot of these categories kind of intertwine when it comes to the stunt category. We really saw this begin a little bit as a track record with Mad Max Fury Road being this big action blockbuster spectacle that kind of made a bit of baby steps for films like that to get honored. We started seeing that roll back again with Black Panther, even back again soon with this year, a big phenomenal year when it came to spectacle filmmaking with Everything Everywhere All at Once, winning Best Picture and Actress and other categories, along with projects like Avatar: The Way of Water getting nominated for Best Picture, along with something like a Top Gun Maverick getting nominated for Best Picture. And even if you want, some people go back and forth about is war film an action film. That's fair if you say it's not. But even that, it still involves spectacle, All Quiet on the Western Front, also doing not only very well in terms of nominations above the line, but stacking up quite a few categories below the line. And if you actually look at a lot of how these films are sold, a lot what gets people coming back to these type of films, it is the stunt work. It is the spectacle direction that both the director and the coordinators combine together in their efforts to be able to sell these stories that are driven by visual storytelling. I think that even some people in the industry, like Chad Stahelski, talking about how this is the main drive of what sells the John Wick films. Of course, he's the director for the John Wick films, and how the marketing and a lot of what they're trying to give to their audience and their consumers in order to come back for each installment, as we are about to have John Wick 4 release this weekend, it is the stunt work. And with Academy Award winning industry people like Christian M. Goldbeck, who is an art director who recently won for All Quiet on the Western Front, the entire landscape of the production work, it was more than just digging holes to recreate World War One, but it was also to map out, before he even started to actually dig those holes, he had to map out an entire terrain that would be evenly leveled for the stunt coordinators and the stunt cast to actually work in order to be safe during those action sequences that involve them between the Germans and their friends. Even the last person I'm going to say, Brad Pitt, in his acceptance speech for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, playing Cliff Booth, the stunt double of Rick Dalton for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And while Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is not an action film, it is a motion picture that very much recognizes the advocacy of stunt work. It even got a SAG Ensemble nomination for Best Stunt Ensemble. And Brad Pitt has acknowledged, even within his Oscar-winning speech, that this is a branch within filmmaking industry that does deserve some type of recognition or merit for a lot of the dangerous, risky work that they give to us at the end of the day whenever you see that final cut.
So why do you think this hasn't happened yet then? Because if stunt coordination is this vital to the filmmaking process, especially for these action films, and if we're seeing blockbuster or spectacle driven films like you're saying being acknowledged even by the Oscars, of course they rule the box office. Audiences have been going to see action films for as long as there's been the modern day blockbuster. But why hasn't the Academy chosen to go forward with this, do you think?
I have two theories. One of them actually involves the reason why it may not be the best option to have stunt category. Let's go with the first theory. The first theory is snobbery. The Academy, not all of the Academy has these snobbish like feelings. I mean, we literally just got a film where you have two people fighting with dildos and everything all
Butt
at once.
plugs.
And of course, and
Get the
hot dog
terminology right.
fingers,
Butt plugs.
butt plugs.
I get it though.
And
I get it. Yeah. I mean, maybe they're not that far away from snobbery though, considering, like you said,
maybe
they just
not.
won Best Picture. So
Maybe not. I mean, when you're having a scene that involves hot dog fingers, I mean, I could definitely understand how there's progression. And I want to give the Academy the benefit of the doubt sometimes, but there are times that they do have those type of ways. I mean, there are many times in history where they had the opportunity to award something that may have seemed progressive, but they just weren't ready for it. And I think that that is one of the reasons.
mm-hmm.
But the second reason, and this kind of goes into where, okay, I can understand why there would not be a category. It's dangerous. You have a category where if this category exists, a lot of people are willing to work hard for the art. Take the Academy Awards out of the equation.
Sure.
A lot of people are willing to work hard for the art. I mean, someone like Tom Cruise is willing to jump off the world's tallest building. Leonardo
He doesn't even show up at
DiCaprio.
the Oscars. He doesn't care about the Oscars.
He doesn't even show up at the
He does it
Oscars.
all
And
for the audience.
all for the audience. And those who even do show up for the Oscars, people like Halle Berry or even like Leonardo DiCaprio, they go through things in which can be life threatening. Leonardo DiCaprio, now I'm not a food specialist when it comes to sanitation, but the dude, he ate a bison's liver, which may not be the wisest thing for someone like me and you to do. Imagine what somebody would be willing to do if there was an award at stake, an award that finally recognized that.
The only thing is, I feel like this is something that we construct in our mind into thinking. I know that deep down, like actors, I don't think anyone necessarily wants to win an Academy Award. Like, I think people want to be acknowledged. I think people want to be recognized by their peers and people within the industry. But I don't think people go into work saying, I better win a damn award for this, or I really hope I get the Oscar nomination for this piece of work that I'm doing here. I don't, in my experience, I've never come across someone that's been that blatant about it. So I feel like stunt work would be the same way, where they would say, no, we're still serving a story first and foremost. We're not doing this for the awards game. I think that is something that we instead would tell ourselves that they're probably doing. And I actually think that might be, yeah, I'm not seeing it. I actually think that they would still put the work and the story that they're trying to tell first and foremost. The snobbery thing, though, I do agree with you on. I think that the Academy probably hasn't done it mostly because it would be honoring films that, for all intents and purposes, like I said, are probably going to be some of the highest grossing movies of the year, are going to be these blockbuster type films. And I'm trying to think of like years past where a film that is so not deserving of an Oscar nomination would probably get an Oscar nomination through the creation of this category. But at the same time, does that mean that the work of the stunts, men and women, and the stunt coordinator, should that be diminished because of the final product? I mean, if the movie's got great stunts, then who the hell cares?
Yeah, I agree because you can make that same case for other categories that are either rotten or Rotten Tomatoes or have a low critic Metacritic score. Look at something like Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. I mean, that's a
Ugh.
motion picture that didn't even for someone like me didn't really work that much,
Oh my
but
God.
it was nominated. If I'm not mistaken, sound mixing when they were two separate categories. And when I saw that film, I was like, you know what? It's not best picture, it's best sound mixing. Even the same thing for not the Suicide Squad when it won makeup and hairstyle. I was like, okay,
Hmm.
the movie's not good, but this is something where if you look at this specific category, it meets up to what the category at the Oscars are trying to acknowledge. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine.
So let's imagine that this category did exist.
Mm-hmm.
Who would the award be presented to?
The award would be presented to, of course, it makes sense to award the Oscar to the stunt coordinators because they are the overall, they're like the emperors. They are the Darth Vader. They look over everything that is going on within the stunt work. It's no different from when you give it to the art director or the set decorator within an entire makeup department or the
I was
visual
thinking like
effects
a
supervisor.
supervising, yeah, like
Yeah,
supervising sound or visual
yeah,
effects, because there's a
no
whole team that
difference.
work underneath them. They don't win the Oscar. Yeah,
Mm-hmm,
okay. I mean, I think that makes sense too.
mm-hmm.
So with that said, then, which film from last year would you say was worthy of a win in this category? I'm not going to say nomination because we could rattle off a bunch
Yeah.
of nomination worthy movies, but what would you say deserve to win? Now, I know that Top Gun Maverick won the SAG for stunt ensemble, but stunt ensemble is different than saying stunt coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So
One
I don't think we can look at SAG to kind of do like a one-to-one example here. I think it would be different in a lot of cases.
If there was a stunt category, yeah, I guess you can say that it's good publicity to look at ensemble not as a precursor but like as of okay, what is the talk of the town, because stunt coordinators also are part of that ensemble as well. But I do agree with
Hmm.
you, not the greatest precursor to look at. um since we already mentioned Top Gun Maverick, I mean, of course, that's a given, but I would say something like an Avatar: The Way of Water would be very deserving for that category, not necessarily because specifically of the stunt work, but how the stunt work had to revolve itself. There's a whole featurette about the film on its actual YouTube channel where they had to revolve around the technology and the motion capture work and how they actually had to create these multiple practices of how to perform these underwater fight
Yeah.
sequences that the motion capture actors like Stephen Lang and Sam Worthington and their stunt doubles, where they're basic. I have never seen where I'm seeing two motion captured performances basically have a BJJ MMA fight underwater, which I thought was very admirable. Do you just want me to name one film? Just we're just sticking
Well,
with
I
one.
mean, I too can also think of some as well, like off the top of my head,
Yeah.
for the same reasons that you're giving in terms of there just being great work on display. I do agree with you. Avatar, amongst its many lists of achievements, there are all these patents that were created for the visual effects work. They also, like you said, pioneered new technology in terms of capturing the performance underwater. So having the stunt team having to do fights underwater, especially like the climactic fight between Quaritch and Sully at the end. I totally get it. I see exactly where you're coming from with going with Avatar here. But then you do have to wonder if they would go for something more traditional. Would they go for something that just had like what would it be about? Like what would be about the merit of the category? Would it be about these revolutionary techniques, or would it be about your simple hand to hand fight coordination, choreography? Because then something like maybe Wakanda Forever or The Woman King could prevail
Mm-hmm.
instead. I think that if you treat this as just like another visual effects extension category, oh, whatever film's winning best visual effects is going to win stunt coordination. I just, I'm worried that they would not take into consideration what actually goes into stunt coordination. So, with that said, what would you say are
Mhm.
the elements that an Academy voter would have to pay attention to in order to properly analyze what should or should not win an Oscar for best stunts?
In terms of analyzing, what is it that, in terms of overall stunt work, because again, like we said earlier, you don't have to be an action film to be involved with stunt work. You can look at
No,
something like a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood
which
and
has
see,
action in it.
yeah, yeah,
It's
it
not
has,
it's not a pure action film, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I will always remember like some of these SAG nominations for movies like The Trial of the Chicago Seven or The Irishman. They get into stunt ensemble, and I'm like, wait, what? But
Joker, yeah.
yeah, Joker, yeah, I mean, like, Joker's got a couple of moments too, like him getting hit by the car and things
Hmm.
that nature, but it's not a traditional straight up action film that you would think of. So yeah, sorry, going back to like what I was saying before, what do you think that they should be looking for then to properly reward this category?
In terms of things to look for, you would want to look for something in which there is a set piece, or whether it's on a big or small scale, where it involves a character being driven forward with the story by whatever they are doing. It could be involved a racing sequence, something like Ford v Ferrari. It could be involved with a fight scene. It could even be involved with a riot sequence, as we see with Trial to Chicago 7. No matter whether you think that movie was worthy for SAGs or not, the point is it fit the bill. And what is the best way how you can look at this set piece that either drives the story forward or progress the characters closer or further from the goals that they are trying to achieve within the narrative of the film.
So it all comes back to story and character. It has nothing to do with action for the sake of action. It's all
No.
about so really it's all about how it makes voters feel when they're watching the movie. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
which is ultimately how they kind of grade every category now. It's not about, people can hear all day, oh, I hate the whale. I hate the whale. The whale is so awful. And all these critics are telling me it's such a bad movie. But when they see the whale, they cry. And it's like all that goes out the window. It made them feel something. You know what I mean? So I
It
think what you're
did.
saying kind of rings true here, where they can disregard all this other noise, and at the end
Yeah.
of the day, as long as they feel emotionally connected to the character that they're witnessing in this sequence, going through this action, whether it's racing or if it's driving or if it's flying, like you said, there's so many different examples. That's worthy of a win. That's what you're saying.
Yes, I was even going back to something like I remember I was rewatching a film. Of course, you may not have heard of it. It's a small movie called No Country for Old Men, and
I was like,
No
where's he
Country,
going with this?
No Country for Old Men. Well, again, like Hollywood, it's not an action film, but it has these set pieces, and the film is very much known for its sense of urgency through quietness and also through like expectation of the fear of the unknown, because you expect it but you don't know when it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
There is a set piece where it involves our main character versus Anton Chirag, in which he's trying to escape from a hotel, and there are these small burst moments of like an obstacle that keeps coming for this character over and over and over again, for our main character Josh Brolin. And it's small stuff like the car crashes or the
Mm-hmm.
small shootout sequences or how they limp after getting shot and diving. It's small things like that to where people think that action sequences are great because of the actual physical hand-to-hand combat. Yes, we could say hand-to-hand combat is great. We could say shootouts are great. We could say race car driving is great. But what makes action sequences thrive for me is, where is the story behind it? Is there a beginning? Is there a middle? And is there an ending? I said that same thing about a clip that I saw with Casino Royale, this famous foot chase sequence, where each decision that the characters make, it speaks and reveals slowly what is this character about and is their objective. James Bond, he's this reckless guy who doesn't really give a crap about whether he dies or whether he lives, as long as he gets the job done. At least that was the younger version of him.
Are you talking about the sequence in the beginning of Casino Royale? Or are you
Yes,
talking? Oh,
the foot
okay.
chase sequence.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm,
Because I'm hearing some of these examples that you're saying here, right? Like with No Country, for example, right?
mm-hmm,
And you said limping before, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that doesn't require a stunt coordinator. That could just be Josh Brolin just limping on set. However, it's a moment that takes place within the entire sequence.
mm-hmm,
And I get what you're saying. Like one thing kind of feeds into another, ultimately to create that cinematic experience and that feeling that we're trying to capture here. But I guess for me, I almost wonder, you know how like Academy voters say most editing equals best editing?
yes.
Why wouldn't they then, in the case of something like, and I'm not saying it's not worthy, but something like
Mm-hmm,
John Wick Chapter 4, where it's just so much action, so much hand to hand combat. And once again, I'm not saying that this is not worthy. I'm not saying this as a knock. I'm just
mm-hmm,
saying, like, how do you compare something like that to something like No Country for Old Men, where maybe that's the movie they prefer for it winning Best Picture, Best Director, but the stunt work is minimal compared to something like a John Wick Chapter 4. Like, would you argue that No Country is more deserving because it's just a movie then that they like more? Or would you say that they need to see past that and go with something like John Wick, which may not get a Best Picture nomination, which may not get those other supporting nominations? You know, it's because I'm hearing what you're saying and I agree with you. But at the
mm-hmm.
same time, then I would be worried about actual, real, worthy work going unrecognized because they just go with the movie that they like more. Which, granted, is kind of like the way the Oscars are now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
one of the risks that's a risk that you just got to take, man. Because
yeah.
I could say that
Right.
same thing for film editing. I could say that same thing for sound. I mean, I remember when something like La La Land was nominated for sound editing against something like Arrival. And when you look at Arrival's work, it's the creation of these aliens and this
Yeah.
new technology versus Arrival. It's just somebody turning on the radio. But is that to say that the work or when somebody's tap dancing, is that to say that that work is less worthy? No, it's really to your own discretion. And it's one of the risks that you have to take when it comes to this category. You can say that same thing for Everything Everywhere All at Once versus Tar.
Yeah.
Is Tar less deserving? No. But I think that sometimes it really is just to your discretion. Once you create the category, once you have the nominations, it is to your discretion unto what makes it the best of what it's trying to do. Is it because of the subtle work, or is it because of the big flashy work that you see with all of these crazy edits of someone's variants throughout their potential lives of Everything Everywhere All at Once?
I mean, I guess in the end, people just shouldn't expect then that movies that typically still go unnominated by the Academy, maybe they
Mm-hmm.
might squeak into a category like this here or there, but predominantly they're still going to go with the movies they still like and they're watching more widely at the end of the day. I wouldn't expect to see poorly received films, even if the stunt work was immaculate, to show up here, just based on the
Yeah.
way that we see how the Academy treats other categories at this current time. Um, I guess the only other thing I have left to really ask is, looking at this upcoming year, right? I mentioned John Wick Chapter 4, Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1, of course. Are there other movies on the horizon that you have your eye on that you would say, just, I know we haven't seen them yet, but like, that you would say, oh man, in an ideal world, it would be really cool to see that contending for this Oscar.
Of course, you mentioned John Wick. You also mentioned, I believe you just said Mission Impossible just now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I'm thinking of some projects that came out earlier this year. Like, let's say, hypothetically speaking, there was a short list, just like some other technical
Right.
categories out
Okay.
there, hypothetically speaking. Then some films that either has already came out or I would expect coming into the horizon. Let's focus a little bit more on the horizon. Movies like Dune Part 2,
Mm-hmm.
where
It's a good one.
it's a film that is more on the sci-fi level, but there are definitely moments of set pieces that very much are a part of the world building and the characterization of someone like Timothy Chalamet's character that I would see. And if you were somebody who thinks that this could be another Best Picture nominee, just like how the previous film was, it would be appropriate to think something like that could potentially happen. Um, I don't think some people are talking about Fast X. I'm not positive about Fast X.
Why not? They're driving cars, and there's going to be hand-to-hand fight sequences. Of course, I imagine. I don't see why not.
Mostly because of what you just said about how even if this category did come out, there can still be a bias towards films that are superior. Now, I'm not saying that Fast X can't be a good movie. We've seen the Fast and Furious films make good movies, but even when they made good movies, and even when they were in the awards conversation, they still fell short. The Grammy nominated Billboard #1 single hit, See You Again, couldn't even get a nomination after it did well with the precursors and had an even powerful narrative with the passing of Paul Walker and that being his final film.
So I guess really then at the end of the day, if they create this category and if the goal was to try and acknowledge, films that typically don't get acknowledged by the Academy, do you think it's kind of a losing effort in that regard? Because they're just not, they're like, I guess people that are having high hopes that they will see movies that previously would not get recognized be recognized because of the creation of this category. We're essentially telling them, hey, abandon all hope, ye who enter here, basically, right?
Not necessarily abandon all hope, more like there's no guarantees. Because I think the bigger story is, can we get our foot in the door? That's first things first. I think the biggest obstacle is getting your foot in the door. Once we move forward and once this is something established, okay, then people like you or people at other sites can advocate for some of these smaller movies, just like how you do when no difference when you advocate for independent films that might be on the lower radar. I think the focus is to have the category existent, because you can't make a case about Fast X or movies like Fast X or movies like The Woman King, where, yeah, if this category existed, The Woman King could have been an Academy Award nominated film. You can't make a case for it if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I guess you're right about that. But also at the same time, too, once we add this category, what's then stopping other branches within the filmmaking industry from saying, well, we don't have an Oscar for our work. Let's get the X, Y, and Z now added. Do you think it would open up the floodgates for more to be added? Because I can tell you right now, the Academy does not want more categories. They want less categories. They want that show to be shorter as much as humanly possible. Do you think, I'm starting to think about it in my mind. Part of me is wondering if that's why it hasn't been implemented, is they are looking to strip down as opposed to add more.
There's definitely a case to be made by that. I mean, obviously, we got that example recently with combining both sound categories, sound mixing and editing.
And then what they did last year, not this year, but last year, with having all these technical categories not shown on the live broadcast. So I think it's obviously multi-layered. There's a lot of different aspects to it here, but it is something that I think is worth talking about, because when I watch a movie like John Wick Chapter 4, which I know you haven't seen yet, but trust me, you'll feel the same way when you see it too.
Got my ticket for tomorrow.
Exactly. You will recognize and you will see that this work should be recognized at the end of the day because of how much it entertains, how much it pushes the character and the stories forward, and how much it really is just a part, so much so, of the collective experience of what we go for the movies today. Go to for the movies today, yeah.
Of course. As Vin Diesel will say, the movies.
Yeah. But Isaiah, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about this here today. Why don't you tell everyone that's listening right now where you can find you on the internet?
You can find me at Izabod, Izabod, 13 capital I on Twitter.
And you can find me at Next Best Picture. Thank you once again, everyone, for listening to this discussion. Do you think that there should be a Best Stunts category at the Oscars? Chime in the comments below. Let us know. Thank you.